I'm going to be grading every first round selection from the bottom half of the 2020 NFL Draft. Make sure to check out my last video where I reviewed the first 16 picks if you haven't. At the halfway point of the first round, things started getting a little weird in the 2020 draft, from unidentified personnel turning in picks to the commissioner nearly crashing out on his couch as millions watched. Well, it's time to review how teams dealt with the pandemonium that was the virtual draft. To be clear, we're grading how each team did with their pick based on the options and information they had. At number 17, the boys somehow came away with CeeDee Lamb, who many viewed as the best receiver in the class. Lamb could do it all as a prospect, excellent ability to win off the line, consistently created separation with his elite route running, and got lots of yards after the catch. This was a home run pick. During his NFL career, CeeDee has already been a 3-time All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowler, and led the league in receptions in 2023. He's the main guy in Dallas's offense and will continue to be one of the most productive receivers in the league. At number 17, this was amazing value for Dallas and one of the best picks in the entire draft. Next, the Dolphins picked Austin Jackson at number 18. With the top tackles off the board, Miami decided to get aggressive and take Jackson earlier than most expected him to go. As a prospect, he came in as a 94th percentile athlete with solid size, but he was still very young and raw as a football player. His hands and his footwork were in need of a lot of refinement, and he didn't seem like he'd be able to play much in his rookie year. So far in his pro career, he struggled his first few seasons, allowed 70 pressures combined over his first 2 years when he played left tackle. The past 2 seasons, he's played on the right side, and he's put up decent numbers, and he's now an okay starter for Miami. Overall, the Dolphins were too focused on addressing a positional need and overdrafted a project player in Jackson when they could have gotten a star like Justin Jefferson or Brandon Aiyuk for their rookie QB to throw to. Considering everything, they're getting a C- for this pick. At number 19, the first F for 2020 obviously has to go to the Raiders. Oakland once again put in their best effort to win the most surprising pick of the year award, 1 year after picking Clelin Ferrell 4th overall. Damon Arnette at number 19 was absolutely outrageous. The number 2 cornerback for Ohio State had okay production in college, but had below average athleticism. He ran a 4.56 40 and didn't have the best fluidity or burst on tape, or even the best size. This was purely a culture fit pick, which is usually not what teams do in the first round. Once he started playing in the league, Arnette struggled, and after 2 seasons, he was cut due to some off-the-field issues, as well as just poor performance. Overall, this pick is the worst one I've graded on YouTube so far, so it's getting an F. At number 20, Jacksonville scooped up Chaisson, who was a member of the national champion LSU squad. He showed promise during LSU's playoff run. He had an intriguing arsenal of pass rush moves, and he was super agile and flexible. However, he was slightly undersized for the position, didn't test at the combine, and had injury problems while in college. On the field, he lacked power, which caused him to struggle in the run game, and his hand usage overall wasn't very effective. Once in the league, he had trouble creating a role for himself in Jacksonville, as he was undersized to be a full-time edge rusher and didn't have the coverage ability to be a backer. He didn't get a second contract, and he's now on his 4th team. This pick gets a D. Through 20 picks, let's look at the grade tiers. A lot of players on either side of the B grade, and we finally have an entry into the F grade tier. This was really a rough first round for defensive prospects, and it's not going to get much better. The second round, however, did have a lot of star defenders like Jalen Johnson, Trayvon Diggs, Antoine Winfield, Xavier McKinney. It's wild to think that those guys weren't picked earlier when looking at the back half of this first round. Next, Philly picked Jalen Reagor at number 21, the most infamous selection of this draft, and one of the sole blemishes on Howie Roseman's tenure in Philly. This was before he realized he could just farm players from Georgia's defense every year. The whole league thought Philly was going to pick Justin Jefferson, but instead Reagor was the guy. Jalen was a big play machine in college. He could run routes to all 3 levels and was dynamic after the catch. However, he was a physically smaller guy, struggled with physicality, and was inconsistent at the catch point. In the league, he's been poor, never got more than 400 yards in a season, and only lasted 2 years in Philly. Overall, this was one of the worst draft misses in recent memory. Luckily for Philly, though, this pick ended up leading to them trading for A.J. Brown a couple years later. At number 22, Minnesota picked up Justin Jefferson. Even with him putting up over 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns in his final year at LSU, where he had to share the ball with Ja'Marr Chase, he still lasted to pick 22 and was the 5th receiver off the board. Justin was also a 96th percentile athlete with ideal size and length. He had excellent variety with his releases and impressive burst out of his cuts, as well as great ball skills. He quickly became one of the best receivers in the NFL and is now on a Hall of Fame trajectory. This pick was a no-brainer and ridiculous value for the Vikings. The Chargers then picked linebacker Kenneth Murray at pick 23. Murray was a 99th percentile athlete at the position, and his movement skills flashed on tape. He had very good range and he was physical. However, he lacked instincts and processing ability. He was more hit and run than he was patient and calculated, and often got caught out of position. He also tended to struggle when forced to take on blocks head on. Once in the league, he was very inconsistent for the Chargers and struggled with the speed of the NFL. Didn't end up getting a second contract in LA. Overall, the Chargers fell in love with his athleticism, but Murray didn't have the right traits to be an every down backer in the league, and because of that, the Chargers didn't get good value with this pick. Next, the Saints picked interior offensive lineman Cesar Ruiz. He played center in college, but has mainly played right guard so far for New Orleans. He was an athletically advanced lineman prospect with a versatile skill set to play in multiple schemes from multiple positions. He lacked some size and power, but seemed like a guy with a solid floor. In the league, Ruiz has had some flashes with the Saints, stretches of good play, but for the most part hasn't been too good. He's allowed at least 20 hurries in 3 of his 5 seasons, and hasn't offered much in the run game. 2024 was his best year so far though, as he only allowed 1 sack and 10 hurries. The Saints doubled down on their belief in him by giving him a second contract, but I think ultimately they wish they could redo this pick. This one gets a C-. At number 25, the Niners surprisingly picked receiver Brandon Aiyuk out of Arizona State. The senior didn't have the best long speed or contested catch ability, but he was a technician of a route runner that created a lot of separation with his quickness and burst, and a guy that comfortably created yards after the catch. His strengths have blossomed in the pros. When healthy, he's one of the best route runners in the league, and he's been super dependable for Brock Purdy. In 2023, he was top 10 in reception percentage, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns as he played his way to a massive contract extension. Overall, San Fran picked a receiver with strong on-field traits and were paid off when he smoothly transitioned to the pros. The 49ers got great value out of the 25th pick, so this one gets an A. Next, the Packers picked Jordyn Love. This one also gets an A. Even with MVP Aaron Rodgers and the entire fan base pleading for a wide receiver, and with T. Higgins being on the board, the Packers still went with the quarterback. Love had a natural throwing motion and promising arm talent, which led to a lot of highlight reel plays at Utah State. He was still a work in progress, but he clearly had lots of potential. Sitting in behind Rodgers for a couple seasons seemed ideal for his development, and he's been great since taking over the starting job. In 2 seasons, he's had roughly 7,500 passing yards and 57 passing touchdowns, and he was able to lead Green Bay to the playoffs in both years he started. Jordyn has shown that he can play at a franchise level, and if he continues to develop, this Green Bay team could be scary for years to come. Overall, the Packers made a smart pick and secured a high-ceiling quarterback prospect who could and has become the successor to Rodgers. After the Love pick, the rest of this first round was pretty rough. Seattle tried their best to compete with the Raiders for most surprising selection when they scooped up Jordyn Brooks at 27. An old-school run-stuffing linebacker, Brooks had excellent tackle production in college. He had great athleticism and was good at diagnosing plays. However, he had poor fluidity in coverage, and there was serious concerns pre-draft on whether he could play all 3 downs in the NFL. So far in his pro career, he's been basically the same player as he was in college. He's had exceptional tackle production and been reliable against the run, but he's been a liability in coverage. He's been in the top 7 in passing yards allowed in 3 of his 5 pro seasons, and was even credited with over 1,000 passing yards into his coverage in 2021, the most for any linebacker in a season in the past 5 years. Brooks didn't earn a second contract in Seattle, and considering that he played up to expectation, you really have to question what the Seahawks were thinking when they picked him. This selection gets a D+. Next, the Ravens picked Patrick Queen at number 28. Many expected him to be the first backer off the board after he had an impressive final season at LSU. He was explosive in pursuit and aggressive at the point of attack and played with plus-level balance and body control. However, Queen played in a talented front 7 and was only a 1-year starter in college. In the pros, he's had ups and downs, but has been mainly inconsistent. Pat brings the desired competitive toughness and athleticism at linebacker, but his ability to diagnose plays and to finish tackles has been unimpressive. Queen has been in the bottom 11 in missed tackle percentage amongst linebackers in each of his 5 seasons so far in the league, which means he's giving up a lot of extra yards. Overall, Pat Queen was an enticing prospect, but he wasn't as fundamentally sound as many thought, and he hasn't lived up to expectations so far. The Ravens get a C- for this pick. Number 29, Isaiah Wilson. The Titans desperately wanted an offensive tackle, so they decided to go with an absolutely massive dude in Wilson. At 6'6", 350, he was an intimidating prospect with loads of potential, but he was very raw in his technique, and there were also questions about his maturity off the field. Tennessee still wanted him, all things considered, but that feeling didn't last long as they broke off the relationship with the tackle after 1 year, trading him to the Dolphins. Wilson only played 4 snaps in Tennessee as he had multiple run-ins with the COVID list and the police, on top of other things. Overall, the Titans were way too desperate for a positional need and truly wasted their first-round pick. Igbinoghene at number 30, he had impressive strength, competitiveness, and explosiveness at Auburn as a prospect. However, he was rough around the edges. Igbinoghene had raw footwork, questionable lateral fluidity, and just overall raw technique. Miami were betting that they'd be able to develop him, which isn't ideal for a top 30 pick. So far, Igbinoghene has failed to earn a lot of snaps in the league and has been mainly on the bench. He was a healthy scratch for a good number of games when he was in Miami. He's now on to his 3rd team and just overall has been a poor player. The Dolphins definitely messed up this pick, so they're getting a D-. Next, Minnesota picked Jeff Gladney. He was a more well-refined corner prospect with plenty of college experience. Gladney had impressive urgency in closing speed and coverage. His skill set was built for a more zone-heavy scheme. Unfortunately, Gladney tragically passed away 2 years later in 2022. May Jeff continue to rest in peace. At number 32, the Chiefs, with the last pick of the round, decided to go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He was a part of the famous Burrow LSU offense, which helped his stock rise greatly before the draft, but this was an absolutely outrageous pick by Kansas City. Rarely do running backs go in the first round, but a 5'7" back with a 4.6 40 It's just unheard of. Clyde was neither a home run hitter nor a bruiser. He was just not elite in any area. If he went to a smaller college, he probably would have lasted till round 3, if not day 3. This was the start of a pool run of early offensive picks for the Chiefs, as they've had trouble identifying top-level skill position players and now have a below-average group around Mahomes. Overall, this pick gets an F grade. Let's look at the final grade tiers for the first round. Like I said in part 1, this is a really hit-or-miss top 32. Not a single player in the B grade tier still. There were a lot of disappointments, some insane overdrafts, but also some studs from this class, mainly on offense. So those are my thoughts on the bottom half of the first round from 2020. Let me know what you think about the grades in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you like the content. Thanks for watching, and I'm out.